Hey, folks, we got a new one for you today, and I thought I would just bring this to you right on the spot. I got another LinkedIn message. This one says, "Hi, Kurt, circling back here because, people on LinkedIn, they're always circling back." It says, "Your point about helping clients actually own their learning platforms rather than stay dependent on vendors caught my attention." Okay, well, I'm pretty clear about that message, so I'm glad that hit. Right. And then it says, after doing this since 2008, what's the biggest mistake you see enterprise teams making when they choose or migrate an LMS? And I think it's worth mentioning here. I'm a little bit on the edge. I think this might be AI trying to have a conversation with me in LinkedIn. I think. But I'm going to send it an answer anyway. And I think it's important that we really examine like what's happening here, right? Um, it's asking what's the biggest mistake you see enterprise teams making when they choose or migrate an LMS. Now, I think that is worth examining. First off, what's an enterprise team? What's an enterprise team? You could say it's the size of a company. It's a 5 million plus company. It's a 10 million plus company. The problem is that when you run an agency, like I run an agency, the definition of enterprise seems to keep changing. Like the goalposts keep moving. But there's definitely a difference between a startup, a mid-sized company, and an enterprise company. So let's just be clear, right? It's a sizable endeavor. And then probably the next thing I would talk about, if I'm going to talk about an enterprise e-learning project, is that there's going to be a fair amount of content. This is not going to be some micro course on how to knit. It's going to be a series of courses. It might be multiple verticals of courses, an entire course load put out. Like our last project we put out a month ago had over 850 videos in it, and it's still growing. Like they're still growing it. Like our MVP, minimal viable product, was 850 videos, and so that gives you kind of a my perspective of what an enterprise e-learning project is. Lots of content, lots of users, lots of activity, lots of things going on. Enterprise, baby, enterprise. Um, I think about projects I've been related to in the past where people might have said, "Oh, that's an enterprise learning project." And then when I dive in, I find out they've got 2,500 users, but they only have like 50 active users a month. And you go, "Well, wait a minute, what's with the 2,500 users?" Well, those are people that came before. They're never coming back again. Well, those are old users. That's not enterprise level. Now, if they want to call themselves enterprise and they want to price out projects, from the understanding they'll be billed as enterprise clients, I guess that's up to them. Based on consulting and things like that. We have conversations like in that particular case, I think they had something like 70 courses, 50 active users a month, 2,500 users in the database. They portrayed themselves as enterprise learning clients. But I was like, hey, let's take a look at some of these 70 courses here. And let's take a look at how many are modern, how many are new, how many need to be here, how many should really be turned into archive videos that you can play in a library somewhere and not really be part of a mandatory learning program. And so that opened up a whole other can of worms, right? And a way to address things, right? So then you would have the legacy training library versus the actual academy that does the certifications and tracking and all that, right? So there's different ways to tackle these bears. But I want to drive back to the message, and I want to read the message again so that it makes more sense. And I see people coming in here live. So if you've got experience in this field, or if you've got questions, comments, concerns, bring them, because sometimes you have a different perspective and we all learn from each other. So I am completely open to any kind of contrarian view you might have. But I'm going to go back. I'm going to read this message again. It's from someone named Saida. So again, maybe it's AI, maybe she's real. "Hi, Kurt, circling back here. Your point about helping clients actually own their learning platforms rather than stay dependent on vendors caught my attention. After doing this since 2008, what's the biggest mistake you see enterprise teams making when they choose or migrate an LMS?" My answer was pretty direct. Again, I don't know if I'm talking to AI or if I'm talking to a real person. So I just wrote a real simple, direct answer. Do you guys want the answer? I feel like making this a game show, right? Like, hey, if you'd like me to just spout the quick answer, put a one in the chat. Let's assume 100 people are in here and everyone puts a one in the chat. So here's my answer. My answer was not enough planning and taking real inventory of content to be migrated or converted. Later, they may talk about scope creep, but in reality, they didn't scope properly. That's so interesting. So I, I know I sound like such a pompous jerk. Read my own comment and saying that's so interesting. But let's be real. Most projects that I work with, especially when there's other agencies involved, I'll hear the term, oh, that's scope creep. There's scope creep. Now the customer says they want X, Y, and Z. That scope creep, that wasn't part of the original. It probably was part of the original program, right? The reason the customer has this idea in their mind is because they talk to a sales associate. And, sales is like, yes, 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 yes. And then when sales transfers the order to operations, it all comes down to budget, right? So all of a sudden we went from yes, yes, yes to, well, now it's got to fit a budget. And you only got so many hours in a budget. Like if you're on, if you're a marketing team, it's a team, people are getting paid. That costs money. So now we're going to try and figure this out. Like, so how are we going to make the minimum requirement here and keep the customer happy? And then you start hearing things about scope creep, right? And you'll hear it from the customer side too. We hired a company to migrate all of our stuff to this XYZ platform. And turns out we're not, they're saying we can't keep the old certificates. They're saying we're not going to keep copies of the old quizzes. We're not going to keep a copy of all of our students from the last 5 years. Like you'll hear this stuff come up and the term will be scope creep. It's not scope creep. It wasn't properly scoped in the first place. You see, I see a lot of agencies especially in my space, right? So I'm in this mid to enterprise level, e-learning space, and I run an agency. And I have learned over time that there is no problem in looking at an enterprise project and saying, hey, there's a lot of moving parts here. We're going to need to do a full needs assessment on this thing. We're going to need $2,500. We're going to need $3,000. We're going to need $5,000 to do a proper inventory of your content. And we're going to need to meet with your stakeholders to see what specifically needs to be included in the scope of work for this project. Now, that sounds to some people crazy. Some people go, oh my goodness, they're not going to pay you $5,000 and you're not going to do nothing. You're not doing nothing. You are gathering the right information so you can give the proper proposal. What usually happens, especially in the WordPress space, I don't know why people are so gun shy in the WordPress space, but they'll say, hey, let me take a quick look at your website. And they go, okay, yeah, there's 50 courses and there's 1,000 students. So we could probably make that happen for, I don't know, $18,000, $20,000. And they go, okay, yeah, we'll migrate that for $20,000. What people don't realize in the WordPress space is that this enterprise learning client probably spent $80,000 or $90,000 or more setting up this old e-learning site in the first place. What people in the WordPress space don't realize is that enterprise learning client is probably spending $5,000 to $10,000 a month in what's called hosting and maintenance, or licensing fees, right? A per student licensing fee. I've worked with a lot of companies and some directly. Like I was the guy that authorized the checks. $400,000 a year to host an LMS that was 12 years old and barely functioned, right? 400 grand a year for that. For $400,000 in the WordPress space, we can build some pretty amazing stuff, right? And so what happens is you end up with people being treated like or adopting an identity like I'm a hobbyist, right? Like I'm a hobbyist, or I help startups, or we're entry level, or things like that. And the danger of that is failure to recognize that, like the site for the White House, the site for NASA, they're on WordPress. You can go through a lot of enterprise examples of WordPress at work. And so you don't want to pigeonhole yourself and put you in this spot where you think just because it's WordPress, it's got to be cheap. That's not true. I pride myself on being able to save customers a lot of money. But let's take a look at that one example. They're paying $400,000 a year for hosting, maintenance, and licensing fees on an outdated LMS that barely worked. We were able to create for them not just online learning, but we're able to surround that learning with a CMS, right? A content management system, homepage, about us page, services page, how to buy your tools page, blah, blah, all this stuff. We're able to surround the learning like with real, like meaty content. We were able to build a blog where the instructors and the trainers were able to create content in a timely way to like keep students informed or interested in the topic. You see, a lot of e-learning spaces don't have those. They don't have the ability. They have the courses and they have the report card and the reports, and that's it. They don't have all the other bells and whistles. They don't have, a place to put videos or a video channel or blog posts or email marketing, messaging. Like they'll leverage a CRM somewhere else, and then you have to like export and import CSV files. You have to reconcile users. You got to do all this weird stuff just to use the LMS. Whereas when Mañana No Mas builds an e-learning platform, we can incorporate the LMS, a sales platform. If you're selling your training, we can put a sales platform in there, membership management, courses, marketing material, email funnels, chat. You can put in chat, you can put community channels. We could let people like build their own social network inside these things where students can talk to students, instructors can talk to students. We can do this really cool like discussion forum area. These are all things that in a lot of other platforms, especially in the e-learning corporate space, is like you just don't see it. You just don't see it because they built these platforms out 12, 15, 18 years ago. And in a lot of cases, they're still paying, top dollar for this stuff that's not even supported anymore. And it's just squeaking through, right? Just trying to like eke out another year of subscribing from this company. And so I think it's interesting. So she sends me the question, what's the thing that people mess up the most? What's the biggest mistake? Well, the biggest mistake is not understanding what the job really is. Like when I'm coaching people how to run their own successful digital agencies, I'm giving them thoughts. I'm giving them information like the number's the number. You can't pre-qualify a customer with your own wallet. There's things in life that you'll see. I might see a Ferrari go down the street and go, man, that'd be cool. I'm not going to have a Ferrari. Okay, I might never have a Ferrari. That doesn't mean that a guy I'm talking to can't afford one. I have no idea what's in his wallet. Maybe he can't afford a Ferrari. And that's the thing with the enterprise e-learning is you need to figure it up. Like whatever it's going to cost is what it's going to cost. The number is the number. Don't be afraid of the number. The number is the number. And so let's say I do this needs assessment and, it's going to take me 850 hours, to put this e-learning replacement together for this enterprise level company. And you go, oh my goodness, well, that sounds expensive. Well, it probably is, because what's 850 times $190, right? Our agency rate is $190. Now, newsflash, I'm probably going to raise that rate really soon. So if you're sitting there thinking to yourself, I need to hire a professional like Kurt, probably want to do that pretty quickly because I think we're going to raise the rate. I've been talking to some other agencies and I've been looking at what the economy's been doing. And yeah, rates are climbing. So if you want to lock in a deal on getting something done, now's the time. Okay. So let's just say it's a big project, lots of videos, lots of course content, lots of things to rewrite, lots of things to manually move over. We say 850 hours of agency time to do this. Okay. That's $161,500. $161,500. Now, if I am an entry level WordPress agency with 5 years of experience, maybe I'm going to be scared to death. I'm not going to quote that job at $161,000. I'm going to say, oh my goodness, we could probably do it for, I don't know, we could probably do it for $22,000. right? And there's some that would even say less than that, okay? But if we go back to it's going to take 850 hours, and let's take that $22,000, 22,000, and divide that by 850, okay? Well, now you're working for $25 an hour, and you're paying people. You got a team. You got a team, and the people on your team, they want to make $25 or $30 an hour. So how are you going to make any money if you're charging $25 an hour as an agency to get something done? Even if you were a freelancer and you were going to spend the 850 hours yourself on it, you can't work for $25 an hour, because now you got to figure out hosting and software and maybe some graphics packages, maybe some other tools, that maybe the CRM you're going to pay for. All of that's going to come out of your end, right? So by the time you take $20,000 or $22,000 and you start soaking out, like, here's the cost of the LMS, the CRM, the social tool, here's the hosting, here's the, well, now you've got what, $16,000, $17,000 left, and you take that $17,000. I'm gonna mess with people today. 17,000, and we divide that by 850, and that brings us down to $20 an hour. You can't afford to work for $20 an hour. You just can't. I mean, the average car payment in this country is $850 a month right now. So you can't work for $20 an hour. It's not going to work. And that's what I see. Like, so when I say the biggest mistakes, right? So what is the biggest mistake? People aren't scoping the work properly. So you need to know that it's going to be 850 hours, and you can't guess that it's going to take 150 hours. You have to know what you're working with. So you have to go into these websites, you have to get admin access to whatever platform they're on, and you have to do your own inventory. And then you need to take that inventory to the stakeholders. So there's going to be an L&D manager, a marketing manager, a vice president of operations. There's going to be a group of people. And you're going to want to put that inventory list of content in front of all those people. And you're going to have to say, it's very important. We need to know what has to come to the new site and what can be left behind. What things do you need on the new website and what can be left behind? And since the new website's going to have bells and whistles your old website didn't have, I need to know who's going to supply me with the copy and the content, the digital assets that I'm going to require for pages X, Y, and Z. Because if they don't have that figured out already, you can offer that as a service. Okay. So now let's say we go back to the 850 hours. So you do a needs assessment, you charge them $5,000, right? You quote them something that's $161,000. And then you say, I got great news. You've already given me 5,000 of that. So the balance will be $556,000, $156,000. And we'll be able to execute on XYZ 1, 2, 3, blah, blah, blah. And then you get that and you do that. That to me is when someone says, what's the biggest mistake you see in migrating an enterprise level e-learning platform? It is not understanding the scope of the work that you're signing up for, and then underbidding it, and then winning the bid and having to make good on it. Now, what's going to happen is someone underbids the job. Let's say they go, oh, we can do that for $50,000. And I've seen this happen before. I usually get called in to fix these problems. So let's say somebody bids the job for 50. They get in there and they start moving over like the main content. There's going to be 8 or 10 core courses, and they start getting all that stuff over. And then they realize, holy crud, we've already paid out $35,000 in contractors to move this stuff. There's only $15,000 in margin left. And we're the ones doing all the meeting and paying for all the software and the hosting and the this and the that. So really, there's only $8,000 left. And what are we going to do? A lot of times they're going to go back to the client and they're going to say, okay, it's done, or we need your approval or your sign off on something. What's the customer going to do? They're going to look at the result. They're going to look at what's done. They're going to say, well, where are the other 47 courses? Or where are the other 723 users? Or where are the report cards for the pre-existing students? Where are all the previously awarded certificates located? And because you didn't scope the work properly, they're going to say that's a requirement, and you're going to say, no, that's scope creep. It's not scope creep, because when you were selling the job, you weren't listening. You weren't getting all of the information from the client to understand what their full expectation was. And so because you didn't know their full expectation, when you sold the job, you didn't sell the job with the proper restraints called out. And because you didn't issue the proper restraints when you sold the job, you've opened yourself up to what you're calling scope creep, but what the customer is calling common sense. And that to me is, that's the biggest mistake. Folks, that might sound harsh. Boy, that might sound harsh. But unfortunately, that's the world we're in right now. That's where we're at. So when someone says, what's the biggest mistake? That's the biggest mistake. That's what I see the most. There's so much more on top of that. There's, do you use WordPress? Do you use Learn Upon? Do you go here? Do you go there? If you're in WordPress, do you use Lifter LMS? Do you use LearnDash, Tutor LMS? Like what, Creator LMS? Like what tool fits? And each use case is different. Each use case is different. My primary choice is pretty much always going to be Lifter LMS. But there are instances where I'm like, you know what? Maybe that's a little overkill. We could do something real quick over here. But when we talk about enterprise e-learning, I think, does best when you have all of the tools available all the time. And I get that with the Lifter LMS Infinity Bundle. Folks, if you have questions about e-learning, managing e-learning, migrating e-learning, e-learning for higher education, for schools, I just did a project where we launched a whole Christian education program for universities to use. If you need help with this, if you have questions, comments, concerns, I want you to reach out to me directly. Kurt Von Annen on LinkedIn, or go to manananomas.com. You can book a call with me, or I don't know, come to the Hutchinson WordPress meetup, second Tuesday of every month. I'm there to help for free. I'll talk to you later. Have yourself a good one and enjoy your day.